Good evening. Welcome to Larry Rinker Golf Live. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by my good friend, Mr. Jon Sinclair. Jon is the owner and lead instructor at Sinclair's Golf Training Center in Euless, Texas. He's one of only 3 master instructors of golf psych in the world and is expert in 3D swing analysis, the mental game, launch monitors, and club fitting. He and his staff currently work with more than 20 PGA Tour professionals and 15 Corn Ferry Tour players. So that would be my friend, Jon Sinclair. And Jon, always great to have you on the show. I'm just going to throw up a couple slides here for our audience, but Larry Rinker Golf Live is on Thursday, 7:30 to 8. And there is my special guest, Jon Sinclair, and my new book, The Journeyman. It's out. I've got the book and should start shipping next week. Very excited about that. And here's some of the stuff we might be talking about tonight. I'll let you talk about this, Jon. It's the motion, not the position. And these are really your notes and your database that you worked with, isn't it?
Yeah, when I did the video, I have a lot more players than that when I did in my database. But when I did the video, it's the motion, not the position. I pulled out the top 65 players in my database to actually create that particular database for that video. I believe I have up to now, I think I'm 120 PGA Tour players in my database. And I just pulled that out because I wanted I set up a criteria. I can't even remember, how many wins, and got the best players that I could in that particular database for the wrist angle video.
Right. Well, talk about the wrist angle so our audience will understand what you're talking about, because we have 4 ways the wrist moves, and then we have the rotation of the arms as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tonight I really want to get into a little bit of the wrist angles around impact. There's been some misinformation given out there that I think if some people have seen, they're probably getting a little confused on. So I want to kind of go over that, because these people are watching my video, and then they've sent me all these emails, and we're trying to help them, trying to discuss the different aspects of the wrist, and they keep going back to 2-dimensional pictures to prove a point that's really not happening. So I really just kind of want to get into that. Let me share my screen with you here.
Okay. I'm just trying to look at my Facebook to see if anybody is on and doing some stuff.
See my screen there?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, good. So what I have up here is my lowest rate of closure player that I have in my database. Let me open this up. What the little bit of the controversy is about is this type of release, and in these areas, let me move your face over here a little bit, but in this area from shaft parallel down through impact into about what most people know is about P, 6.5, P, 7.5, just after impact.
Right.
And their idea is that they have the shaft lined up with the arm, the lead forearm. And that's just really not what's happening in the golf swing. So we see 2-dimensional pictures like this one, and let me get out of that one, and like these different players. There's Bryson, Cameron Champ, John Rahm, and they see the shaft going up the left arm in these 2-dimensional pictures, and then they think that that's really what's happening, and it's really not. That lead wrist is seriously extending through impact, and they're rotating their forearm through impact. And so we want to get a better picture of what we should be feeling. And I'll show you a little video that I got from the internet, which would be right here. This would be, I pulled it off the internet. It's actually Freddie Couples. Can you see that good?
Yeah.
So if we watch his forearm as it just replays over and over and over again, we see how much massive rotation that he gets. And if we even freeze it back to that point, it's a little hard to see with that thing that's in the middle, but you can clearly see how extended his wrist went really fast. And this is just past impact.
Yeah.
And what they're saying on their challenge to me is that, you know, we see these little blips in our wrist angles that happen. And a lot of that happens because of impact. And if you watch Freddie's wrist go through, if you can imagine, we have a sensor glued to the top of that hand, and watch it impact, how that really jerks around and moves. So that sensor's moving, and it's not giving us clear, solid data. And I'll show you the little blip that we're talking about. So pull this one down. That player doesn't have it. Let me get a. And this is, they say all the, you know, the low rate of closure people have this particular blip in the screen. But you can see this is the lead wrist of this player. And this is the little blip that they're talking about. Can you see it's so small?
Yeah.
It's that little tiny one, and that's the rotation of the forearm that you just saw in Freddie, that rotation of the forearm. And we see this little blip in the wrist angle and that little blip in the forearm. And that's when, you know, just past impact, when the shocks got up to your arm and you saw that jerk, and that's what's happening. So when I look at these, I kind of smooth that out in my mind and know that this arm kept rotating without that jerk, and so did the wrist. And this green part, as this goes down, it's moving towards extension. And you can see this particular player is my lowest rate of closure player in my database. And you can see at the top of his swing, this is a driver, his wrist is bowed or flexed 35.5 degrees. So on the way down, he's pretty much extending all the way, because he kind of has to, all the way to impact. So if you watch this all the way to impact, he'll actually make it in extension at impact. So now he's at 4 degrees of extension at impact. So he moved almost 40 degrees from the top to impact.
Right.
And so, and he keeps going, and now I'll make it even bigger. He keeps going to that, you know, here's about that P7.5 position. And you can see now he's moved from basically 4 degrees of extension to 24 degrees of extension. So he's moved in that point 20 degrees. And I see that's a pretty good number of extension. And these people are saying this doesn't happen based on a two-dimensional picture where they don't see the rotation of the arm. They don't see what we just saw in Freddie's picture. And then they're saying that that little blip is a player actually stopping their arm from rotating, holding off the face, you know, doing all this stuff as if at 6,000 degrees per second, I'm turning my elbow, you know, my wrist over, that I could actually stop that right past impact or through impact. That's just not going to happen.
Well, the thing I would say, John, is what we can see with our eyes versus what we can measure, I think are different. And to think that, here, bring us back on full screen here.
Okay. Stop. Okay.
Because I just want to say, if somebody's there and they go there, you're not going to see that much. You know, if somebody was there and they went there, you're not seeing a whole lot. And that, unless they, you know, even if they got a camera shooting, what, 1,000 frames per second,
It's
Are
hard.
they really seeing what you're measuring with the sensor that's here versus and here? You have two
It's
sensors
actually the
right
one we're
there,
doing on
right?
AM is here, and then I
Yeah,
have one here. So we're
yeah,
looking at this joint here, and we're looking at this joint here, and so we can see how they're moving in
right.
relation to each other. And in a camera in 2D, what happens is as you turn that hand away from the camera and you're extending pretty
Right.
good amount, the camera's not seeing it.
And
As
there's
you saw
also
in that angle we had
ulnar
of Freddie.
deviate. There's also
Oh,
ulnar.
plus you're doing all that and you're turning and your
Yeah,
hands, moving. In that case, he's coming down and after impact, he moved 20 degrees. Well, that's going to look like he didn't move much in a two-dimensional camera. And that shaft is not going to stay up your arm,
well,
and
if you think about it logically, the faster the club head's moving, the more this is happening
yeah.
because the grip's going even slower and the club head's going even faster.
And we certainly wouldn't want to do too much to stop that club head from moving faster.
I haven't met anybody that wants a club head going slower with the driver.
No. And so, really in my teaching, I want them to feel like they're letting go, feel like they're turning, and we teach them how to release that hand to where they don't have to feel like they hold off the face. They can still hit a fade and fully release the club. I mean, that picture that I just showed you, that's a fade.
Right.
That guy hits a fade and his wrist angles look different than most that I do, but he is just going the whole way, and he has a ridiculously low rate of closure at impact. We can debate whether that's good or bad. I mean, he's the straightest driver that I've seen.
Right.
And, he's complaining that he's hitting it left. And I was like, what do you mean you're hitting it left? And he goes, well, you see that one? I said, yeah, the one that's 5 yards left of the line. He goes, I'm pulling it. I got to stop that. I mean, it's 300 and something yards in the air and it's 5 yards left of the line. And I was like confused. I was like, well, that looks pretty good to me.
Well,
So,
I think the whole thing comes around, I'm upper core. Most people want to teach this mid core. Average tour players swing to everybody that walks through their door. And I'm only well over 90% upper core, and I've measured 900 people now.
mm-hmm.
We do believe 2/3 of all golfers are upper core. So we see the people that release early. I could pull some videos up of people releasing early. And so they're always told, hey, you got to stay in posture, get more rotated, get that handle more forward, and hit that with that flat left wrist. Well, they might want to feel that if they're trying to trap it and hit it low, but good luck hitting a 4-iron like this with your hands, in that left hand like that, because it's going to go quail high. I mean, if you want to hit a 4-iron in a British Open wind that's blowing 30 or 40 miles an hour, yeah, that's a good shot. But if you want to hit the ball up in the air with a 4-iron, you're not going to get it up in the air with forward shaft lean, a bowed left wrist at impact, and you might break your wrist trying to do it.
Well, I got some swings in that 3D where I tried to hit a 100-mile-an-hour driver and hold that.
Yeah, couldn't
never do it.
Right.
And it hurt.
Yeah.
So,
well,
and I hit it about 3 feet high.
You can't do it because of the orbit of the club head.
Yeah, it weighs probably 100 pounds. If we're swinging around 100, 110 miles an hour, that club's heavy. How am I I'm not strong enough to stop it.
Right.
And I don't know any golfers that would be strong enough to stop it, and we wouldn't want to.
I
So
think
we've got to have a free release.
But I think the whole thing stands from the premise of wanting that perfect mid-core golf swing, Adam Scott position at impact. And we see so many amateurs show up that release early, their hips aren't rotated, they're simply upper core. There's really nothing wrong. They stand up, and everybody wants to try and make them look like a mid-core tour player, which first off, their body's not going to be able to do because there's other things that affect that, basically where your weight is, how much you can rotate your right arm and elbow. That's all I got. I had a junior today. He could put his arm down about like this. He was almost low core, 9-year-old boy, good player. But, that's a great test right there. If you can't bend that back much, you're upper core. And yeah, everybody wants to make everybody look like Adam Scott or pick your favorite mid-core tour player.
And we want to know with those players, we would want to raise their rate of closure. We want that club snapping around a lot quicker than we would a lot of the tour players.
Well, I would think the weaker the grip and the earlier the release and the less rotated the hips are at impact, that player is going to have a faster rate of closure than a low core player with a strong grip that is their weight's in their left heel when they're hitting the golf ball. They're not jumping much. And so that rate of closure is going to be a lot less because the release is a lot later.
Exactly. And I think that's what all the data in the 3D shows, that's what we see. And so we do have different models we should be, teaching to, in your case, the way you upper lower core players, they're totally different people. And, we do as instructors have people coming in all the time, everybody, it's whoever won that week. That's who they want to swing like, and you know what I'm talking about, right?
Totally.
And
yes.
And then you put them up on the screen and it's like, dude, you sit behind a desk all day and you're tight as a tick. You don't work out. You don't have your personal trainer traveling with you every day, and you want to get in that position. And then you say, well, here, let's try. And then they're like getting cramps and going, whoa, stop. Right. So there's,
I like what a top teacher said. He said, if your hips are not that rotated at impact, don't try and speed them up. And if they're really rotated at impact, don't try and slow them down. Can't they just be what they are? And I think a lot of people are ignorant, John, to the fact that where your weight is in your feet. If your weight's in the balls of your feet, anybody out there can stand up, put the weight in the balls of your feet, and then try and turn your hips through, and they're going to lock up. And then get your weight in the middle of your feet, and you're going to see you're going to have more rotation. But a lot of us don't have a lot of external rotation in this trail shoulder, and that's going to mean there's no way we can get this elbow like Hogan in front of our right hip coming into the ball. It's just not going to happen. We physically can't do it. But yet they're working with trainers trying to get more of it. I mean, that they think that's good. Hey, we got to rotate more. That's good. But that's just not what I see in my world.
And the famous one that would kill everybody is they put that arm and they start wanting to pull on I'm showing you this, don't do it. You start pulling on that, trying to get that extra rotation, you're going to completely rip your shoulder out. You see people doing that all the time because, I've been told,
right.
You can see I have a good bit of rotation there. So that's why I'm a lower core player. Because I've got a lot of rotation in my body.
Right.
I can do that. And even at my age, and I'm definitely tight and all that, I can still play the lower core and I hit fades. So
Well, most low core players play fades. Lee Trevino, Dustin Johnson, Paul Azinger, Daniel Berger, all those guys, really strong grips, really rotated at impact. Set up with a lot of knee flex and had their weight in the middle of their feet. So they could shift and turn and burn through the ball. But that doesn't mean, the recipe for everybody. I've only measured 13 low core out of 900, John. To me, you guys are ghosts that are low core.
Yeah.
I just don't see them. And I think studying, the average tour player that's winning is a mid-core player. So, okay, that's what the good guys do. Let's try and make everybody do that. I really believe, John, we've coached out of kids that were upper core. We coached them out of their natural swings, and that's why we never see them on the tour, because by the time they get to college or go work with somebody that's supposed to be a good teacher, now they want to put them in whatever model, whatever the flavor of the month is, what they're trying to work on, that they get coached out of their natural swing.
I think that's right. And I think as a coach, that's always my biggest fear with a young athlete is to, apply my preference where I would actually deter their progression. And so I try to stay as mindful as possible because I'm scared to death of doing that. And usually if you'll allow them to develop and swing and as they change and you got to talk to the parents too, to make sure, because I don't know how many parents tell me, little Johnny or little Susie, she's got to stay on the ground. She's got to do this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, the only way she can get speed is to jump off the ground because they don't have any muscles yet, right? And
Right.
so I don't want to stop them. We'll see how they progress as they get older and mature.
Right.
But I'm really try to be mindful of not coaching out that natural ability that they may have. And then as they get older, we can find out more things they can do as their muscles develop and they develop. But the men aren't fully developed till they're about 25, and the ladies are sooner. But certainly there's changes can happen to even tour players from 20 to 25 that are amazing.
Well, you're a mental coach, and I spent my life in the self-help section of the bookstore. And the less you think, the more you're going to be able to repeat what you're trying to do. I say to my students all the time when they walk in, I go, hey, the less I change, the better in my world, because at the end of the day, our students have to own their swings. We have a question from John Ubry on Facebook. Club fitting question: can my TPT shaft that fit me in my TS2 work in a TM sim driver if I changed tips?
Possibly. The only problem that we have in that one is the Titleist tip is deep. So if you have, here's a TPT shaft here. So if for that player, we're going to have a spot that's been, taken off this way. And so that may not be the same length. I don't remember the Titleist versus the Tim, but I think the Titleist may end up a little shorter, or excuse me, a little longer in the which would be okay. But then we're going to have a tip that doesn't cover probably all the glue marks. And if they didn't sand all the way up high, you could do it and be okay if you're okay with seeing a little bit of glue on your shaft. I can't guarantee that same shaft would work in that head because the CGs are different, the possible lofts are different. What I would do is go to the nearest TPT fitter that has, the universal tips and try it in your new head before you went and started changing it.
Right.
From head style, say a Callaway head to, the Epic to the Flash to the Maverick, those shafts have transitioned pretty well. The pings to the pings. But when I go switching brands, it's sometimes almost half the time is a different shaft fit.
Yeah.
I do it for tour players all the time. They're trying 2 or 3 different drivers to get the optimal in each driver. A lot of times we have to have a different shaft in each one of them to get the same result. So we do have to watch for that.
Well, how many tour players are using your shaft now?
It changes week to week. But I think total Korn Ferry and tour, I'm thinking we may have probably 3 to 4 each week on the tour. And then probably on the Korn Ferry, I know we have around 10 to 12 per week that are playing it. And I mean, we have 20, last I checked, I think 24 worldwide wins since we introduced it a year and a half ago so we've got it in some pretty good players' hands. So the shaft is good. And just so all the people out there realize too, the new red range over the old one, the blue range, where we did have some breakage problems, it was 0.6. I think that's where TPT kind of bad name, because we had 0.6% of these break, and mostly by high profile players. So it seemed like it was 10,000.
Right.
That is gone. This is 0. We've had 0 break, which I've never seen in a shaft. Changed the way they made them, and it really has made a difference. And they're actually straighter than the old ones.
Wow.
And I'm working now, even today, I did test on fairway woods, on hybrids, and we're going to move into wedges here soon. So that's coming.
Well, that's awesome stuff, John. And it's always great to have you on the show. I'm always learning from you. If someone wants to see John, you can go to the Sinclair Golf Training Center in Euless, Texas. And their website is sinclairgolf.com. And I'd like to thank my sponsors, Titleist, FootJoy, the Ritz-Carlton Golf Club Orlando, and the Red Sky Golf Club in Vail, Colorado. Also, Flight Scope V1 and Right Balance. And Jon, always great to catch up with you and learn from you. I think James Lights has a good saying. I think he got it from somewhere else. He said, why guess at something you can measure?
That's right.
And you've actually measured this stuff. So I can't remember exactly what Joe Pence said, or Joe Pence, Vice President Pence said last night. But he said, we're all entitled to our opinions, but facts are facts.
Yeah, that was actually a very good say. You're not entitled to your own facts. And until, these measuring systems like AMM has been peer reviewed, excuse me, and until we find something that can prove that it's better, I mean, that is the standard, and those are the facts that we have to go off.
Right.
And we cannot validate 3D measurement with 2D pictures. That's not going to work. It's the other way around.
Also, I had Dr. Rob Neal on this show, and anybody listening can go to my YouTube page and watch the show I did with Dr. Rob Neal, and watch the show I had Jon on, where we went through all the wrist angles. And in my opinion, talking with both of you and having you on my show, your conclusions are very close together.
And doing it separately.
Rob Neal laughs at this doesn't go into extension here, going through impact.
Sure, and you should laugh. I mean, because it's what happens. And Doc Neal and I mean, Doc got me into 3D. I happened to go with AMM over his biodynamics, but the technology is the same. We're using the same capture system, and we've done all of our research separate.
Right.
And yet we come up with the same conclusions, and that in itself is validation.
No, that's peer review.
Yes.
And that's
really, and anybody else that does it, we usually always come up with the same conclusion. So if you can get two different systems measuring the same thing and it looks the same, then that's pretty much the way we got to go for now, until something better comes along.
And I think people want somebody feeling lag and rotation, staying in posture, and this staying flat longer. But if they're upper core, that's not going to work for them. And I think so that's probably what it drives people looking at 2D and saying, well,
they can go to my website and go to the Pro Shop page, and there's the 2.5-hour movie just on the wrist angles.
Right.
And they can go look that up, and it's called It's the Motion, Not the Position. And they can get a good idea of what the wrists really do in both, and I cover both amateurs and pros in that video.
Right.
And I found it's actually been pretty good for players. I didn't make it for players, but I've had some players watch it and get great benefit because I'm not using a lot of numbers. I'm just talking about motion.
Yeah, and you're showing what's consistent, what guys are doing, and I really learned a lot watching it, and I had some good takeaways with it as well. Well, Jon, all the best. Thanks for tuning in to Larry Rinker Golf Live. Till next week, keep swinging.
Thanks for having me.